After my next guest, I really don't like using this analogy, but for people who don't really know the dynamics of how newscasts work or what really happens behind the scenes of a news telecast, I think it's just a good analogy, but again, I don't really like using it. So I already interviewed John Carlisle, who is an executive producer, and if we say, I'm using air quotes here, he's the brains, or if producers are the brains behind news telecasts, and I thought it would be cool to get the people that most people see and really relate to, and they're the face, and of course the on-air talent, they're the face and the heart of the show, because they really do keep the show going, and they're the lifeline of the show, because without them, then how do we really get the news out there? Because I know for sure some people just aren't as brave as my next guest is, who really make it seem so easy, even though it takes so much, and it takes so much to get to where they are, because people just think that being a news anchor, you have to have a pretty face, or you're just a glorified reader. Well, my next guest definitely proved all those people wrong, because she's worked her butt off ever since she started in this industry, and I hope you get a better understanding of really what it takes to be a news anchor, because if you think it's easy to be a news anchor, you're just watching a really good news anchor, and my next guest really proved that. So if you remember, I already spoke with the producer, my executive producer over at WESH 2. And if you remember my analogy, it was he's kind of like the ventriloquist puppet. He controls the backstaging and makes sure everything's working right and everything's going smoothly. So I figured it would be the right move to get the on-air talent now. So without further ado...
Hi. Wait, does that make me the dummy if John's the ventriloquist?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure where I fit in that analogy.
It's a bad analogy, I admit, but it's an easier way to get people to understand how kind of like the news system works.
I'm totally kidding.
I know. But so let's just get right to it, because like you said dummy. You know, people assume anchors are dummies.
I'm a reader.
Right, exactly.
I just read off a teleprompter.
So that's what I want to say. So what do you tell people when they say, like, oh, to be an anchor, you just have to be a pretty face and know how to read?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard question to answer, because I feel like a lot of people think they know a lot about our business because they see it, they watch us work, but what they don't see is all the actual work that goes into it. And obviously working with us, you see what we do. You know, we get in really early in the morning, and I'm constantly copy editing scripts. And even when I've copy edited a script, sometimes we have to go back and make other changes. My job, a big part of my job, is to always know what's going on in the world. So I do a lot of, reading online, newspapers, watching a lot of news, because that's part of my job. And it's also to make sure that what the information we're putting out there is right. And that is probably the most important thing I do. We have producers who are working all night long, putting together a whole show, and it's easy to miss something or make a mistake. So Jason and I, my co-anchor, are kind of like the last line of defense before we put it out over the air. And we try to make sure everything that goes out is factual and will benefit our viewers.
And the way that you want to say it too, you
Exactly.
know, that it has your own style to it too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little factors that people don't realize. They just think, oh, it's news, it's facts. You could just throw whatever you want out there.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, Jason and I are two very different people. He'll say something completely different than how I'll say it. And, our producers are younger, and, maybe Jason and I are older than them. We'll say it differently, and we can put a different spin on it or a different background. And it's just, there's a lot that goes into it that people don't see. So it is kind of offensive when people are like, oh, you read off a teleprompter. Right. But we're the ones putting in a lot of the work that goes into that teleprompter, and it's not like the words appear out of nowhere. And
so a lot of people like to, again, knock on anchors and reporters and be like, look, you guys aren't really like journalists, and they label that more of the producers.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I feel that the reporters are more of, and the anchors are more of the journalists, because they have to present it,
and not only that, anchors don't just come out of college and become anchors. Like, I reported for years before I hit the anchor.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. I want to get to that a little later. That's the second half. Yeah.
But that's how I became a journalist, hitting the streets, and that's the legwork you put in to get to the anchor desk. So I wholeheartedly consider myself a journalist, first and foremost, before I am a TV personality or whatever people consider me, because if you don't put in the legwork and you don't do the research and you're not a journalist, it's hard to make it on TV. You can only fake it for so long. You know what I mean?
And credibility is all you
Yeah,
have, right?
exactly.
I mean, if you don't, look at Brian Williams. He got relegated to
Yeah.
MSNBC
That
now,
was
right?
unfortunate because, you grow up watching somebody and you're just like, oh man, why did you do that?
And you thought he was a good one. You thought he was one of those, like, honest ones.
And now it's like, he's still working in the business, which is fine. I guess everyone deserves a second chance. But, me, I'm not going to lie to my viewers, it's just like the basics
of course.
journalism. So it was kind of like, oh, come on.
It was a huge letdown,
Yeah, I know. It was hard to see.
And so I want to talk about that also too, because like you said, everybody just gets to know you as your face and they think you know you.
Yeah.
They think that they know you. So how do you kind of like handle that of like just going out on the street and meeting people who it's obviously a one-sided relationship where because you don't know anything about this person, but they think they know your entire life.
Exactly. So when I meet people, I like to ask them a little bit about themselves so that it's not
nice
just me
icebreaker.
talking about me.
Okay.
That was a trick that I learned from my old co-anchor in California, Dale Julin. He was older than I was, and he had obviously been doing this for a very long time. So I was like, I get really nervous when people approach me. I don't like talking about myself. And he was like, you got to flip it around. Ask them about themselves. Ask them what they do, what their name is, about their family. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Isn't it? I know. It really works for me.
That's really good. By the way, she said she doesn't like to introduce herself, which she didn't. So this is Michelle Imperato.
Hi.
She's an anchor at WESH too. And she does the 5 a.m. and the 6 a.m. show, and she does obviously like fill-in work when she has to.
And the noon too.
And the noon as well.
Everyone forgets the noon.
Yeah, why is the noon like the redheaded stepchild?
I don't know, because like we do a lot of news at noon. I mean, that's the time when things are breaking. It's the middle of the day, and like it's just the forgotten show. But we do a lot for noon.
TDs tell me that that's their like least favorite show because it's the one where they have to do like all the automatic camera work, and then like you said, it's the one that's kind of like it's in the middle of the day.
It changes constantly. Like I feel bad for our producer Ed and whoever winds up producing it to like fill in for him, because you have your whole show planned out, and then at like 11:45 it's like all hell breaks loose, and you're like, oh no, my whole show just went out the window, and you just have to change it on the fly.
So speaking of hell breaking loose,
okay.
So what does an anchor or a reporter do when kind of that when that happens, when you think you have like a rundown and a setup of what you want to do, and then
you just have to be alert, pay attention, listen. Don't I don't want to say not overstep your boundaries, that's not the right word, but don't assume you know more than you do know. So you got to understand what the facts are and don't jump to any conclusions. Like the other day was a perfect example when we had in Orange County, we heard that there was a deputy shot. We didn't know any real good information like to go off of. We just knew certain things, but we were in wall-to-wall coverage for 2 hours, and we have to talk about what's happening without confirmation of important facts. So like we have to just keep going off of what we know off of, and it's hard. That's where we struggle sometimes, because as journalists, just because we can see things, but we're like, that's not confirmed yet, and like we saw a body on the ground when our chopper was flying over it, but we can't be like, that guy's dead,
right,
even though it was clear he was no longer living.
So is that where you lean more on like the producer, where you kind of
and that's because the producer is in the booth or in the newsroom and they're getting information. We're at the desk, and we have our computers in front of us, and we can see what's out there, and like we can get Twitter confirmations, like the sheriff's office was tweeting like what that was their first information was, officer needs help, and it was out on Twitter, so we knew that much. But when they're in the thick of it, the sheriff's office can't update us every 5 minutes, so then we're relying on our reporters in the field who are talking to the deputies, and and it's hard as an anchor because we're supposed to anchor the show, hold it all down, and we are in a studio, so we're relying on what other people are telling us. So when all hell breaks loose, you just have to trust the people around you. That's so important, that we trust our producers, trust our reporters, that they're giving us the right information, and just really pay attention, be alert, and I guess that's the best advice I could say.
I know it was a common, it was very prevalent in the episode with John, but I mean, it is the biggest story that happened in Orlando. I'm obviously talking about Pulse.
Yeah.
And you worked it.
I did.
You were there. You weren't even scheduled to work,
No.
and you came in. It was on a Sunday.
Yes.
And so I was just so what happens there? Like, why? People don't understand that. They're just like, oh, Michelle's just in, like,
No, I was on vacation. So Friday was my last day of work, and Saturday I had off, and then I was moving into the house that we're in right now. So we were at my condo, and my husband and I, we were sleeping. I didn't have my car. I had one dress in my closet, no shoes. I just had makeup, and we were sleeping because we were going to be moving into the house the next day, and then, bringing some stuff over. We had movers scheduled for that week, and we were going to be painting. And so in the middle of the night, I got a phone call. I remember my husband, he was like, your phone's ringing. And I turned over, and I woke up, and I picked it up, and it was Kirsten, our news director. And all she said was, and I'll never forget it, she said, Michelle, this is Kirsten. I know you're sleeping, so I'll speak slow. There's a shooting. We believe there are mass casualties, and we need you to come in. Can you be here within the hour? And I was like, yeah. Of course.
See, but I wanted to just touch on something, because you were saying you were talking about an officer down. We were wall to wall for 2 hours. That day we didn't stop for 24 hours.
It was all day. And so what happened was, it was actually probably better that I didn't have my car with me, because my husband drove me in. I put my makeup on in the car. He was when I was like brushing my teeth and everything in the bathroom before we left, he was looking up articles to see, like, he was searching Twitter, actually Stuart's Twitter feed, to see what was going on. And then he drove me in. I was putting on my makeup. I got there in under an hour, and I was on the set like a few minutes after I walked in the door. And it was weird because I knew there were mass casualties, but like I got on the set, and Brett was the one who was anchoring that weekend. He's not even our weekend anchor, but he was filling in. And so I was the first anchor called in, and I just had to sit there and listen for a minute to see what was going on and what facts we knew. And I was watching this video that I honestly could not believe I was watching. It almost felt like I was sitting there on the outside looking into it for a minute, and then I just had to jump in and, start anchoring.
And go, yeah. But what a lot of people don't know is that we knew for a long time that there was multiple casualties, and we were thinking 20. We were like 12 to 20. But we couldn't report it because, like you were saying, we had to confirm it. We had to get it, fact checked and everything.
And people may wonder how we know that. It's because we're at the scene. We had Stuart there in minutes. He got a tip that something was happening, and he was on the ground, like in the area, talking to people. And so, just doing like a quick count, like he's like, there are many people who are being rushed to the hospital. Like, it's hard to tell how many people are dead, but just like hearing the buzz on the street. But we can't confirm the things that don't come from authorities. You know what I mean? And so, and especially in a situation like that, it is so sensitive that we don't rush to judgment. Like, we always want to be right, not first. And because
which is how it should be.
Because let's say we did say, like, someone on the street told us 50 people are dead, and then it turns out that's not the case. There are people who know that their loved ones went to that club that night, and they're fearing the worst, obviously, when they're hearing what we're saying on TV. And we would never want, obviously, to put false information out there, but also to scare the public if there's no reason to. This was a different situation because it wound up being true. And it was definitely the hardest story I've ever reported on, being there for the beginning hours of it. So I anchored 4 hours that day, and then they let me go home because I had to, I was moving. So, I wasn't scheduled to be there. But then I came back Monday morning, and I worked that day too. And then I came back on, I think it was Thursday. So like my vacation was kind of broken up. And I would have been there every single day had I not had,
no, of course, life gets in the way too, of course.
Happening, mover scheduled and, all kinds of things going on. And I had to be out of my apartment. So it was just like, obviously there were things that I had to do.
So you said it's the hardest story of your life. What did you learn from Pulse?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much from Pulse. It was just...
Or your biggest takeaway, I guess.
I don't know. That's really hard. I learned a lot about Orlando as a whole that day, just because the video, even like watching it, like, it's just so hard to look back and see just like the people who were in the club helping other people who were in the club. It was just so...
Loading the bodies onto trucks like SUVs.
That's what I learned about Orlando. And then even in like the days afterwards with all the memorials and just seeing all of those people come together and, surround a community that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have, And it was just heartbreaking. I remember anchoring Monday morning, and we had to read the names of everyone who died. And I was like getting choked up, and it's real emotion. You feel a connection to the community. I'll obviously never forget what happened that day. And I know Orlando won't either, but it's just, it was definitely the hardest thing to do. And especially seeing like that video of Mrs. Leinonen and leaning on Stuart, and like you just feel like, oh my gosh, your heart just breaks for these people.
And Mrs. Leinonen was the mother of one of the victims there, and Stuart Moore was one of our reporters or anchors, and he went out and he was interviewing her, and she's just like, I just want to know if my baby's okay, and she's, you know, bawling, and you could even see Stu's like uncomfortable.
Well,
and
because but those are the moments that like,
and that's what I wanted to ask you, like, how do you kind of handle those moments where, you know, like we're people too, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I try and tell people when I tell them that, you know, I work in news and things like that, because immediately that's a red flag to people, and they immediately start judging.
I know, and I hate that, because we are people too. And like Stuart in that situation, he did what any normal person would do. He gave her a hug and he was trying to comfort her. Like, yes, he was doing his job, you know, by reporting the news. But like in that moment, he's just a shoulder to cry on for her. And like Stuart said, he was praying with people in alleyways, and that's just who he is. And that's just who we are. We're people. I mean, I wasn't out on the street at Pulse that day. Obviously I was in the studio. But in all of my years of reporting, I have interviewed so many family members who have lost people. And it's just, I remember interviewing one woman who, in New York, her husband, who was a firefighter, didn't die in a fire, but he died trying to save their daughter, I believe it was. Like, it was like a horrible, like, boating thing. The kid went over and he tried to save her. And like all these media, like the media was trying to like get an interview with her, and they just showed up at her door. But our assignment editor called ahead of time and was like, we'd like to send our reporter over. And she spoke with us, and only us. And it was, I remember just sitting there with her, and she was just crying, and I was crying with her, because it's heartbreaking. I mean, even though we don't know these people personally, you do get to form a relationship with someone when they are spilling their heart out to you, you know?
It's someone's life.
It is. I mean, these are real people, and we completely understand that, you know, and these are their stories that they're choosing to tell us, and we have a responsibility, you know, to do a good job for them and to tell it accurately, and, you know. So
what do you tell someone when they go, if it bleeds, it leads? You know, that's the news motto, isn't it?
And it stinks, because I hate when people say that, and I hope that newsrooms everywhere aren't operating under that, you know, rule. Mm. But like, I believe the most important news of the day is the news that's going to affect our viewers. And sometimes, you know, sometimes that is a huge car crash because it is blocking all of I-4, you know, and nobody can get to work, and they're like, what's happening? But, I mean, I hope that people realize that we make editorial decisions and decisions on what goes into the show based on what we think will affect people's day and their lives. And, you know, I mean, and maybe a story doesn't apply to everybody, but it will apply to somebody else. You know, if we do, and I hate to use this, you know, example, but if we do a shooting in Pine Hills, maybe it doesn't, somebody in Heathrow doesn't care, but the people who live in Pine Hills do care. Mm-hmm. You know, that's their community. Those are their, you know, neighbors. Those are their friends. Those are their family members.
And so, it's always how you angle it. If you if you're showing that, like, hey, there's a shooting that's going down, we want to let you know why things are happening in this area, how they're kind of making it better.
Yeah.
It makes,
and we do always follow up, you know, like there's been so many efforts in Pine Hills recently, or other, you know, areas that have had crime, to, you know, really turn things around. You know, the officers are doing what they can. They're starting crime scene units and, you know, task force that, you know, will enhance the relationship between the officers and the community so that they can, you know, cut down on the number of incidents that happen in, you know, all over the area. And so
we're in a very big transition period in news, because we really don't know what's kind of happening with news. Yeah. Because I mean, not many people are really watching news anymore. So my question is, where do you see news going, and do you see it being around because I see it being around forever, just because it's a public service.
Yeah, and I believe it will always be around, and I think more people watch than we think are watching, whether it's for 15 minutes in the morning or in the afternoon or whatever time that they get home. I do believe that they try to turn it on, especially local news, because they want to know what's happening around them, even if they can't stand, you know, like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, or whatever it is, the national network, you know, even if they can't stand that, local news is different because it is your community, and we're reporting on, you know, your town hall meetings, what's going on in your school districts, what's going on, you know, with your taxes and your water bill and your electricity bill. So I think that news will always be around in that regard. And I hope it is. I mean, and the internet had kind of, you know, threw the TV business for a loop.
It threw everything for a loop.
I know. and it stinks, because when I go to speak with, you know, schools or career fairs, and it is, the internet is hard to beat. It's free, you know, people can get their news anytime, and they can just Google something and a million articles will come up. But like you said, we are providing a public service also, and I think that we bring something different to the table than just like an article that you're reading on, the internet.
Yeah, and not only that, you connect also with the personalities of the news organization, and like you said, you feel like that local tie. But I also feel what's good about news is what I learned through Hurricane Matthew when we were covering it is that people need to know this information.
I know.
Like we were updating the water at all times and the electricity and everything, and I feel people take it for granted, and that's the problem.
And they get so mad. Like they're like, "It's not bad. What do you do? Why are you on TV?"
My branch broke. That's all that happened. It's like,
but think about if it wasn't, like if it didn't turn. That storm happened to take a last minute turn, which we are all very grateful for. But we are providing a really important service because there's information that people need to know. And I was actually really upset the day of Matthew because we had a guy on our show. He called in and he was riding out the storm on one of like the barrier islands, and I was just like, oh no, because he was like, this is fine, I have a generator and we're gonna be fine, we'll be here tomorrow morning. Granted, the storm turned and he got lucky, but that's really irresponsible information to be giving our viewers. Like we're giving them potentially life-saving information when the storm's coming, when you need to get out, what emergency services are available for you. And I was kind of annoyed. I was like, get this guy off the air, because I don't want him telling my viewers who are watching us and trusting us to keep them informed of how to stay safe with their families and their loved ones, and then this guy's like, we're gonna be fine.
Yeah, it's like the guy that was strapped to a tree. I was like, what is wrong with you?
And our reporter was like, no.
Yeah, please leave.
You gotta go. Like, he had his boat tied up to a palm tree. And what was his name? Steve? Was it Steve?
No, was it Steve? Boat Steve? Or
Steve?
No, because I remember the Jeep. There was like Jeep Bill or something like that.
I don't know. But these people became like, and people were concerned. Like, we had them we posted the stories on the internet and on Facebook, and people were like, how is he?
Yeah, on Facebook Live, like, help him out.
Was it Dan?
Dan
what was his name?
Dave?
Oh, I gotta look that up. But
now.
like, we were all concerned, and our reporter was like, you need to leave. And even if we're telling you to leave and it turns out to be nothing, at least you left and you have your life. You know what I mean? Everything else is replaceable.
Materialistic,
Yeah, while it's heartbreaking, I wouldn't want to lose my house. If me and my husband were safe, I would feel better. It's that's all that really matters.
Of course. No, yeah. And so again, we're in a really weird transition period with news and stuff. But so I want to talk kind of a little bit just about Trump, because it is important that people know that he's blocking certain news organizations from entering into things that are public knowledge that we should all have access to, and you shouldn't pinpoint who or how the coverage is being brought to the audience.
Okay.
So my question to you is with all this fake news and all of that, it hinders, everybody believes it's just like, oh, everything on the news is fake or all this and all that. So why is he doing that, and why, like, how do we build up back our credibility, because he's knocking down the fourth estate?
So here, let me just start generally.
Right, yeah.
It's hard to hear the president of the United States knock a profession that you've dedicated your life to. I wake up every morning. I have sacrificed a lot for my career. I moved away from my family so I could be a journalist, and I wake up at 2:30 in the morning. I go to work. I try my very best to be an honest journalist and, put out the right facts and do the best job for my community. So when, the leader of the free world is saying that, we're the enemy of the people, it hurts me personally. I think the term fake news is grossly misunderstood. And like you said, people hear it and they think everything's fake, but it's
grotesquely bastardized.
Yeah, and it's important to understand what fake news is, and know that fake news, there is fake news out there, but there are articles and things that are created to intentionally mislead the public. And as a journalist, we have sources and people tell us things, and if we get a fact wrong, it's not because, and I can't speak for all journalists, obviously there are people who are bad and lie, like we talked about Brian Williams before, but most journalists do not go out there trying to mislead the public. That's not, we don't wake up in the morning and we're like, oh, nice, a new day to lie to the public. Like, that's just not what we're doing. I mean, we go to school for this, and we do, and speaking for me in general, I personally, I go to work and I want to do the best job that I can and be honest and make sure that we're doing the best we can for our community, because that is our job. Like you said, we are a public service. So, yes, it's hard to hear that, and it's scary to see, so many people, using the term. I mean, I go through my news feed and people who are friends with me and know me personally, and they're like, oh, the media this, the media that. And it hurts because, if they know me personally and as a friend, I hope they don't think that's what I'm doing. Also, I think there is a big difference between local news and, national. So, and I think people, when they say fake news and all that, they're like, oh, it's not you. We're not talking about you. You're local. But then again, I mean, I was approached in the supermarket the other day by a former viewer of our station who just for about 45 minutes just told me how horrible we were. We're so anti-Trump. And I'm like, I have never once made a statement on the air pro, or against him, for or against him. So I don't know where you're getting that, and I'm sorry that you feel that way. She said that, but it's all about how you view things, because then someone wrote on my Facebook page last week when I was like, hey, tune into the news. He was like, why? So I can watch all you Trump cheerleaders? So it's all about how you view things. I mean, Friday I was anti-Trump and Saturday I was pro-Trump. It's just all how people are viewing
so
what
it's
we're
based
saying.
on just on you confirm your own biases.
Exactly. So I don't know where we go from here, and it's really hard and it's scary because obviously this is my profession, this is how I make a living, and it's what I believe in.
And it's how we keep the government
honest.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that. And, it's so funny because the other day, last weekend, I watched All the President's Men again. I had seen it years ago, but I was like, I got to watch that one more time. And it's just, you could see what really great journalism does. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say everything that's out there is great journalism, but when there are real stories and real things that need to be investigated, and then government officials or the public is just brushing it off as, oh, that's fake. No, there's real news that needs to be investigated here, and it's just scary because this.
I mean, it's like you said, it's
there are real consequences when things aren't brought to light,
and we need to bring them to light. You need
That's
to be held responsible. Exactly,
and it's and the media has that responsibility. And I get it when people are saying that the media, has made its bed, now lay in it. Yeah, and sometimes we don't always focus on the most important stories, like, oh God, the Kellyanne Conway couch story.
There's a giraffe story now going around.
And it's just I get it. And that's feel good news, the giraffe news. But I get when people are like, who cares how Kellyanne Conway was sitting on the couch? And we chose not to cover that. WESH didn't cover that because
who really cares?
And let the 24-hour networks talk about that. They need to fill 24 hours worth of time. That's what they're going to do.
So would you say kind of ads kind of take away a lot from how news is done today? Because you have to compete with ad dollars and getting viewers and ratings, and we're kind of in the olden days. It was more of just, okay, this is our hour broadcast, this is what's going on.
Well, we keep our news and our advertising separate. No advertiser is going to tell us what to cover. That's just how we operate. And I hope that that's how all newsrooms operate, but you just never know.
Right.
I mean, if our advertising department comes to us and is like, this is our client, we're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Just because they don't deserve any more airtime or what, you know what I mean? We are, we're not biased, and we just need to do what is best for our viewers and for the news and what we think is news, you know?
That's enough Trump talk.
Okay,
No more Trump talk.
Thank you, because I get really uncomfortable talking politics.
I really do too.
Okay.
Because we're supposed to be objective and in the middle.
And like I said, I'm not saying I'm for or
and I can
against
be witness, honest, because you and Jason, I have to admit, you guys are really just middle of the road with everything.
You.
Even when I write a word in a tease or a script or something, you guys be like, I don't know if we should use this.
Exactly, because we never want to be putting our opinions out there, even if we do have them or if we don't. It's not for us to tell people how to think. We need to just give them the facts and people make their own decisions. Okay.
So, question. So when you get on, obviously, do you have nerves? Do you get nervous?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, in the beginning, very much so. When I first started anchoring, I remember my first day anchoring in New York. I was super confident, and I'm like, that was so easy. And then after that, I'm like, what am I talking about? I am so nervous. And it was, I got, especially when I first started at WESH, I was very nervous. I made a 100 market jump. I was in market 124 in our sister station in Salinas, Monterey. And so when I came here, I was with the big dogs now, top 20, and it was a lot of pressure, and I felt it for sure. So, I was
So how
really
do you
nervous.
handle those nerves? How do you kind of just
well.
roll with the punches?
No, just kidding. It's hard because, I don't tell people this, but I suffer from panic attacks sometimes.
Oh, wow.
I usually don't have them on the air, which is good, but they creep up sometimes. And I haven't had them recently, which is really nice. But there have been times where like I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack, which is not good.
Wow.
So like I try to, keep that under control. But those are like the nerves that I have. But when we do breaking news, that's nerve-wracking just because it's such a fluid situation and you just don't know what's coming. When there's a rundown and you kind of know what's happening, it's like, all right, I can do this. This is my job. I do this every day. But I mean, there are some reporters and anchors who are like, I never get nervous. This is fine. But it is live TV. It's a huge responsibility. I still get a little nervous,
So do you have like a kind of like a technique or a system for like before you go on? Like, do you have like a breathing method? Do you have like a whoosha, goose flaba, or whatever?
Are you kidding me? You see me like I am running to the set. Like I'm like, is my hair
I didn't want to tell people that. Yeah.
I'm like, I don't have lipstick on. I don't have any shoes on. Like, is this okay? But
Thomas, are you getting my feet?
yeah, I'm like, don't show my feet. But yeah, it's so no, there's no mantra. I have zero time for that in the morning. My routine in the morning is get to work, make sure I look TV presentable, read my scripts, make sure, I know what's on the schedule for the day, in the rundown and what I'm going to be talking about, and that's what I'm more concerned
All right,
about.
so now I want to get to know like a little bit more about Michelle. So, so how did you become? Like, did you always want to be a journalist?
No,
no,
not at all. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was such a lost soul. So like my sister was born and she was like, I want to be a teacher, and she's a teacher. I kind of like floated through life like, I don't know what I want to do. I had all these like unrealistic, dreams of what I wanted to do. And I went to college first I didn't want to go to college. I never wanted to go. And after high school, I was like, I'm just going to work. I had a job and my mom was like, yeah, that's not going to fly. So you're going to go to school. So I went to community college on Long Island, Nassau Community College, took a bunch of different courses, and it was like liberal arts. So it was very general, got what I needed to do. And I took so after that, it was 2 years. I got my liberal arts degree, and I was like, I'm not going to go to college anymore. And she was like, you're going. My mother is like, are you kidding me? Like, you have to go.
Sounds like my mom, yeah.
Well, and looking back, obviously she was right. But, at the time, I'm like,
Can't admit that then, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I have an office job, and I can do whatever I want. And so she was like, no, you can't. You still live in my house. You're going to school. So then I went to SUNY Old Westbury, which is a state University of New York school, and I did like this test where they tell you what you're supposed to be doing with your life, and they said like media and communications would be good, even though I'm not really great at like public speaking is terrible for me. I hate doing like, when I have to get up in front of a large crowd, I get very nervous. That's when I get really nervous. Okay. So I went to school for that, and so I did 2 years of media and communications, and while I was there, I met a professor who was like, I think you should take some TV classes. And I was the kid who was like, no, I'm going to run the audio board. And he really was pushing me. His name was Professor Grossman. And he was like, no, I think you really should give it a shot. And we did like, they made us read. We didn't have like a big TV production thing in college. This was years ago. And so we would like write stories, and then I'd have to read them in front of the class, and it was mortifying, and I hated it. I didn't want to read them out loud. And but he was like, you have to do an internship. I think you should do it at News 12 Long Island. And I went there, and I interned for their evening anchor, and I fell in love. I was like, oh my God, we're the first on the scene. We get to be there, and this is so cool, and just to see everything. And my mom was like, you started watching the news again? Because growing up, we had to watch the news every single night, during dinner. That's what we did. And for a while, I was just like, when I was on my own, I just didn't have to. But then I started really getting back into it. And I just kind of fell in love. For a while, I wanted to be a print journalist. And I was like, I'll just write. When I really did love journalism, I was like, I'll write for newspapers. And that one professor was like, no, sweetheart. You need to be on TV. And I was like, no. But yeah, so that's how I did. So then I interned there. And then I wound up working there after college. They hired me as a PA, so I would run teleprompter and, file tapes. Do you know, tapes are these things that are square, and they have film on them, so that's what we were using back in the day.
I think I've seen one before.
You've
maybe.
Seen it? Okay. And so I'd have to organize the tapes and pull tapes when they needed certain video, and so yeah, that's what I did. And then that was at News 12 Long Island. And then I got a job at TV 55, which was the other local station on Long Island. But before I got a job at TV 55, the news director there said I had what could have been the worst Long Island accent he'd ever heard and said that I needed to continue my schooling. So, okay, I'm kind of all over the place here, but when I got my second degree, so I did my liberal arts at Nassau Community, then I got my bachelor's degree at SUNY Old Westbury. After that, I was like, hey mom, I'd like to go back to college. And she nearly hit the floor because the kid who never wanted to go to college wanted to continue going to college. So I started my master's at NYIT on Long Island, and that's where I did LA News Tonight, which is where they teach you how to, write, go on stories. I would drive my own car, shoot my own video, edit it, with the big, huge cameras,
Wow.
tape to tape editing. I was terrible at that. Thank God I didn't have to do that for very long. So I did 2 semesters of that, and that's when the news director at TV 55 was like, you're horrible. Never gonna hire you. And then I did 2 weeks of another semester. I sent him another tape, and they actually hired me. And I was a freelance reporter, so whenever they needed me, they'd call me in the morning. If someone called out sick or they needed somebody, I was in the door. And at that time, I had a job that was very understanding, that would let me just leave at the drop of a hat and, call out that
very
day.
lucky.
Yeah, I worked for a sports publisher in Elmont, in Queens. And so they were very nice. My boss there knew what I was trying to do and was like, yeah, go. And so I did that for a year. I freelanced, and then they hired me full-time as their evening reporter. And then I started backup anchoring, and then finally I was the evening anchor there. I worked at that station for 6 years, which is a long time to work at a really small station, but I just kept getting promoted so quickly and in a timely manner that I felt like I was getting different experience throughout that 6 years, freelance reporting, full-time reporting, backup anchoring. Then I anchored for 2 years, and I also did this political talk show that aired on the weekends, which was really good. It was kind of like a sit down with our politicians in the community.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I really enjoyed that, and I used to work really hard at it. And I remember just always researching the topics, and if I got to book the guests myself, sometimes I would do it with my co-anchor, and if he was out, I would do it by myself, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna nail this. And I would just do so much research, and then of course the conversation never goes the way you think it's gonna go, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll just
Definitely
go with
what
the
I've
flow.
learned through podcasting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, go ahead.
No, wait,
Sorry.
are you done? Or do you continue? No, keep going. No, keep going. I want the full story.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
after TV 55, I had kind of hit my ceiling there. There was only 1 half-hour show, and I was the anchor of it. I did it for 2.5 years that I was the anchor, and I went to California to anchor KSBW's morning show. We were ABC and NBC in the market. So I did 2 hours of news, and then I reported in the afternoon for the noon show. And I did that for 3 years. That's WESH's sister station. And then they knew I kind of wanted to come back east. There was this job opening, and it had been open for a long time. I'm talking 2 years the WESH position was open because it was for the CW station. They didn't really know what they were doing with it. And when I first saw the opening, I was like, oh man, I'm so far in my I'm not far enough in my contract that they'll ever take me. But it was when I was ready to go, it was still there, and they had me fly out, they interviewed me, and I got the job. So That's how I got to WESH. Yeah, I've kind of been, so I went to New York, California, and Florida. I like the coast.
You like the coast, yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been kind of just really engulfed in news, and a lot of people wonder because, we've been talking about you came in on a Sunday, you would work overtime and weekends, and, you worked the sunrise shift. How do you balance life? How do you hang out with your husband? Or
I have no life. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just kidding. It's hard. I mean, so my husband worked in news, so he kind of knows the demands of the business, which is really nice. And I know people are like, you should never you should never marry someone you work with. I married my photographer, and he's very understanding. He knows that this is my dream, and he loves that I'm passionate about it, and he understands, that this is what I want to do, which is nice. And so how do I balance a life? I mean, he's worked overnights and weekends, so he just knows that when I have free time, we have to do things then. And it kind of stings because my bedtime's supposed to be really early, but I stay up probably later than I should just to spend some time with him. Mm-hmm. And it gets frustrating sometimes, but it's just what I do for the job that I love.
See, because it's, again, and going back to, a lot of people, oh, you're just a pretty face. You go in, you anchor your 1 hour or whatever.
Oh, my gosh.
Then you leave.
I know. My favorite question is, what do you do for the rest of the day?
I guess people don't understand that it's like that is the smallest part of your day.
I mean, it's only the 2 hours or 2.5 hours that I'm on TV. Like, I'm at work for 9 hours. I mean, it's a lot of prep work, a lot of reading and writing and editing and
getting to know the community, trying to find stories.
Goodness, I know. So like, I have to do public appearances as part of my job also. So last weekend, okay, I'm not complaining about this at all. Last weekend I was a judge at the Food and Wine Contest, and it was amazing. But this weekend I'm going to be the MC at a charity basketball game for a church, and the week before that I was reading to elementary school kids, on a Wednesday afternoon, and then in a couple of weeks I'm going to be modeling in a church fashion show. These are just the things that we do. Okay, so I'm truly terrified. I hate being on. I don't like modeling any kind of clothing, so that's like the biggest fear of mine. And I also don't want to trip on that stage. Anyway, so like these are the things that we do. So even when we're not at work, we're working.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you ever like decompress from news? Like, because it must be hard. Because if you miss an hour of news, you're behind.
Yeah.
It's like when you're in college and you miss one math class.
Oh, gosh.
That next math class, you're like,
what happened?
What language is this?
Yeah.
So, do you have like an at peace kind of place, or do you kind of like take like, okay, I'm going to take an hour to catch my brain?
Well, yeah. And it's easier now to stay up to date because of our phones,
Right.
Like I can just look up whatever I hear of and, I can scroll through Facebook or check all my news apps and, stay up to date. On the weekends, I try to give it a rest. Sunday I'll try to catch up or whatever, but Saturday, and I hate being on my phone all the time around Andrew because that's not fair to him also. So if I happen to see a new story on the weekend, I'll check it out. Obviously, if it's important, I'll read it and, but I try to keep our weekends to us, and then Sunday night I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah, you just catch up real quick.
What I miss?
John Oliver, last week tonight.
Everything.
So my last question is for what advice would you give someone who like for myself, for example, I would love to be an anchor and things like that. So what advice would you give to someone, or what would you tell yourself now, this Michelle Imperato, to, I don't know, an older version of Michelle Imperato?
What would I tell an older version, or what would I tell my younger self?
Yeah, what would you tell your younger self?
Okay.
Sorry.
Please, I don't want to be older than I am right now. Anyway, so I guess what I like to tell people is work hard, never say no. Like if your boss is saying, come in on the weekend, you come in on the weekend. If you're working overnight, you're working overnights, whatever it is. Never say no, be honest, be ethical, and be fair to your viewers. And it's just... work as hard as you can, and you have to love it. That's what I always tell kids. If you don't love this business, do not do it. You'll hate it. If you don't love it, it's going to be the worst decision of your life, because like you said, it is all consuming. It consumes, even when I'm out of work, I'm watching the news, and it's just... And
I don't think a lot of people realize that is what it really entails. It's an exhaustive profession.
It really is. Like, and I've said that to my husband 100 times, I am so tired. I come home from work and I am mentally drained. I'm physically drained, mentally drained, and I just,
Not to mention, you're dealing with a lot of, like you said, like real stories, and some of them are tragic. And
yeah. And that's the thing, like it can weigh on you, but I will also say that it is an amazing job. You get to do so many things you'd never get to do. Like I said, last weekend I was a judge at a food and wine contest. Like, when do I ever get to do that? And then, I've flown with the Thunderbirds. I've, met really incredible people, from celebrities to politicians to just everyday people who, trust me to tell their stories. And I've helped people. I've done investigations. So, it really is an incredible job. And like I said, I've got to move across the country and back, for a job that I really love. I lived in Monterey for 3 years, which is one of the most beautiful places in the country. And, people, would die to live there. And I got to go there and be an anchor, do my dream job. And it's just, so there are a lot of great things about the media. I hope this wasn't like a negative Nancy session. No. Because I wouldn't trade it for anything,
So I know I just said that was the last question, but I have one more.
No, that's fine.
I have one more question.
A journalist always has one more question.
One more question. So obviously you have fans, and you were talking about people who are kind of like, oh, you're a Trump supporter, you're this, confirming their own biases and things like that. But do you kind of have, since you are on TV, do you have like those weirdos? I'm sure there are weirdos. Are there not weirdos?
There are weirdos. But I hate
like how do you handle that's what my real question is.
Well,
is like how do you politely handle someone who's being obviously vulgar?
Okay, so here's the difference. There are fans of your show who love waking up to you and they feel like you're part of their family, so they reach out to you on the internet or wherever through email. I've gotten letters before. But then there are creeps who just write disgusting things to you, and that's disgusting. So like you just either don't answer it or, you know, you block them on Facebook or social media. But there is a difference between fans who truly enjoy you on TV and that I love interacting with, and I truly do. You know, there are people who write to me every single morning and I love responding to them. They're like, "Oh, I loved your dress today." I'm like, "Oh, thanks so much," or "Oh, that story was great." And, you know, we have that kind of interaction, and I enjoy social media for that because it lets them get in touch with me directly. But if people are just going to reach out and either be nasty or, you know, rude or, you know, ask me out on a date even when you know I'm married, like, that's just ridiculous.
And what's the point? I'm always curious, just like, what do you get out of it? How can you like just do that?
I don't know.
How does that like in your thought process? Like, yeah, this is a great idea.
Yeah, being a woman in the media or on the news or, you know, a meteorologist is very different than being a man, because I would say the amount of disgusting or embarrassing messages that I get pales in comparison. Or Jason doesn't get nearly as many as what I get.
It makes me sad being a man, because it's like, you know, you guys can't even wear like a dress or something because it has to be like below your knees or you know.
Well, and it just even like weird things like the foot guy, the guy who likes my feet, and
there's a guy who likes your feet.
I think so. I mean, he sends me weird things. So Amy had a guy ask for her shoes, I believe it was last week. Yeah, like it's weird stuff. In California, I got jail mail from the prisons. Like it's just something that happens. But like I said, the majority of it is just true fans who love you and, you know, want to just talk to you about whatever. And I enjoy those interactions, and I just try to ignore the rest.
Good, bad, ugly, weird.
Yeah.
You really just gotta love news.
I know. It comes with the job.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for letting me into your lovely home.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Now, do you have a better grip of kind of what it takes to be a news anchor? How it's not as glorified as people say? Of course, it has its perks, and you get to be the face of something so cool, of a telecast, and you get to impact so many people's lives, that we were saying, since it's public service. But look at how long it took for Michelle to get there, for example, and how she worked and worked and worked to get to where she is now. And yeah, of course, she's reaping the benefits of what she's done now, but even then, she still has to sacrifice some of her weekends and some of her time to be with her husband. And of course, she still gets those creepy, weird requests, which I still don't understand, of, you know, feet pics and things like that, which, again, that's beyond me, but that's just all encompassing of what it takes to really be a news anchor. And I really hope that you got a better understanding of how you're not just a dummy who just knows how to read. You have to understand the news. You have to understand that it's all encompassing, as I said before. So again, thank you to Michelle for everything and giving us insight into what it really takes to be a news anchor. And guys, please send me your comments, email me, whatever you want, through Twitter, through Instagram, whatever it is. You already know on the show notes, I have it all posted there. But I just wanted to say that there might be a few changes coming. I might do a little interesting episode where it's just me solo dolo. I might bring on someone else. Who knows what's going to happen with that. My life is kind of in a little transition period right now, so I'm kind of adjusting, and I kind of want maybe school me to adjust a little bit too. But again, let me know what you think. If you want, it's not going to change too much. I mean, the style is going to be mostly the same, but it might have its differences. So again, just let me know if you want that to happen, and I really hope you find your passion, pursue it, and peace.